Marktschreier Tagebuch, June 7th, 1939. Louisa shared with me the great fear she had carried as she cared for her mother. Fear that the consumption that spread from her father, Friedrich, as her mother cared for him, would spread to her as she in turn became caretaker. That a wasting death would be her future should she stay and perform her daughterly duties. It was her father who was first stricken with consumption, and Louisa watched as her mother Louise tenderly cared for the man who had regularly beaten them both. Louisa watched as Friedrich passed on his consumption to Louise before passing on, and Louisa, certain that she too would share the slow, wasting fate of her father should she stay, remained at her mother's bedside as thoughts of abandoning her mother in her time of greatest and final need played in her mind and preyed on her soul. She stayed, confessing to me that her decision was more from lack of options than out of love. Louisa whispered that as Friedrich's death approached, she came to realize that her mamma prayed not for her father's recovery, but rather for him to pass. That Louise longed for release from the tin-pot tyrant who ruled their tiny roost as only a clucking, strutting cock, certain that he had been cheated by his wife's pregnancy, and that Louisa, born a 7 pound 7 ounce preemie on February 25th, 1924, had likely been the only reason for her parents' August 10th, 1923 wedding. When Louisa spoke of her parents' death, I revisited with her tales of how my cousins Ivy and Sari came to be under my father's care, of the birth of mein Halbbruder Floyd, all relatives that I know are of my generation, but whom I cannot help but think of as aunts and an uncle. Though 20 years separate me from my 3 closest relatives, I have nearly as full an understanding of the hardship of death by illness that haunts Louisa. Told how Papa had left Duluth and settled at Fort Snelling, where 4 years later cholera took Augusta and left Papa a widower, caring for 3 young children. How Papa managed to push through his grief and quickly marry Oneida Eads, a 17-year-old widow from Mankato, where Papa, Mama, Ivy, Sari, and 3-year-old Floyd then settled, and where I was born 27 years later. As Louisa wove her tale of woe, my mind slipped back 20 years to June 28th, the date of daughter Drew's birth and Hazel's death, and then leapt forward a decade to the monstrous action that took Drew's life. I again told Louisa a tale less than truthful, a recital tenuously tied to reality, but more disambiguation than illustration, whitewashing for her my experience with death, destruction, and depravity.